So apparently it's open mic morning here. So just bear with me. I'm going to try to formulate a few quick ideas to sort of put things into context a little bit, big picture, and also related to the Kinot we're about to say, Arzei Halvanon, which is one that I think a lot about, and I'll sort of explain why. So Rav Soloveitchik, in most of his essays and descriptions of Tisha B'Av, describes the tension between Avelut Yeshana and Avelut Chadasha. We have archaic, old, almost expired Avelut, like horrible, terrible things that happened in our remote past. And then Tisha B'Av is also the sponge, it's the funnel for every single horrible thing that happened subsequently. And Chazal described this as starting with the Meraglim, which happened on Tisha B'Av, and that set the tone for Tisha B'Av being the day where all horrible things happened, or at least we commemorate all of the terrible things that happened. Now what's interesting is Avelut Yeshana is the Churban Habayit, right? It's the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, but really the most Yeshana was the Meraglim. In other words, it's all a question of your perspective. We have Kinot talking about the pogroms in Europe. We have Kinot talking about the Holocaust. We have Kinot that hopefully we'll say about the 7th of October. Which are the Yeshanot and which are the Chadashot? It's all just a question of perspective. But today is the day where we are sad for all of them. We commemorate all of them. Now, what I think is interesting is probably the wrong word, but what I think we all notice about this year and last year's Tisha B'Av is how it's very hard to get into the commemoration phase. Why? Because we're still in the midst of a horrible, terrible tragedy. Rav Shlomo last year and last night, talked about how do you say Kinot? How do you start articulating anything? Because you just can't stop. There's no end. Because again, we're literally in the middle of it. Please God, in a year or 2 years, we'll look back and we'll be able to commemorate. But you can't commemorate something that's active, that's still in process. And so, in particular, just thinking about the Kinot we're about to say, Arzei Halvanon. So there are 2 times where we talk about the Asara Harugei Malchut. One is on Tisha B'Av and one is on Yom Kippur. And if you notice, there are a lot of very clear differences about how they're described. So, and just in the interest of time, I'll summarize a few of them. On Yom Kippur, there's a whole long introduction. There's the Russia who wants to avenge the sin of Yosef and the brothers, and then the Kohen Gadol goes up to Shamayim, and there's a whole long introduction. In Tisha B'Av, nothing. It's just, there's a terrible thing that happened, and let's jump into it, and let's see immediately what happened. Also, conclusion. So on Yom Kippur, we talk about the Misas Tzadikim and how it should be a kapara for us. And on Tisha B'Av, it just abruptly ends. The Kina on Tisha B'Av is this horrible thing happened, period. Move on to the next Kina. And there are many other nuances and differences along the way in how it's described, and I think the difference is pretty clear in that on Yom Kippur, we're trying to use this for a positive angle. The Misas Tzadikim is mechaper, and this is part of the big picture, Schar va'onesh, din v'cheshbon, that Kadosh Baruch Hu is mechashev. We could put it into this context of what we're davening for and make sense of this tragedy. But in Tisha B'Av, we're in the middle of it. In Tisha B'Av, we're literally, according to the Baal Akina, we're almost like re-experiencing the tragic death of 10 of our tzaddikim, and there's no rhyme or reason, there's no justification, there's no silver lining. It's just a real tragedy. And so, again, just going back to what we started with, when you look back and when you have perspective, you can sometimes find silver linings. You can explain things a little bit more. You can try to find the small little parts of light that emanate. Chazal try desperately to find the positives in Eicha, right? What's the pasuk that everyone talks about? Kara alai moed. This is going to be a moed. It's going to be a happy time. But if you read the pasuk, it's terrible, right? It says Kara alai moed lishmor bachurai. It's like they found a time to kill our children. But in hindsight, when you're many years removed from it, you could look back and you could find the small positives that emanate from it. But I think that Arzei Halvanon is, again, appropriate in general for Tisha B'Av, in the tension between Avelut Chadasha and Avelut Yishana and the middle of trauma as we're in right now. There's really not much that we could say. There's no divine intervention that we could speak about. There's no silver lining that we could talk about. It's just a horrible, terrible tragedy. And that's just what we're in the middle of, and that's what we're experiencing now.
The Christians decided that Israel, the Holy Land, which is holy to them also, was in the hands of the Muslims. So they said, okay, we're going to go on a holy quest, a crusade, and they're going to go and they're going to redeem the Holy Land from the Muslim infidels. Everybody's an infidel to the other side. So, but which seems like maybe a noble goal, I don't know. But on the way, they decided that there's this group of people who are also infidels called the Jews. And so on the way to attack the Muslims, they just basically wholesale slaughtered Jews. In particular, this talks about that's later on, right? There's different communities and cities and everything.
Primarily in the Rhineland in Germany.
In the Rhineland, yeah, we're just totally wiped out. And it's just really amazing to think about how, nothing has changed in a sense. It's this is when we can say that, but nothing has changed. We're still always caught in the middle between other people. We try to, now, at least we seem to be trying to, lead our own fate with our own army, but these were the days that the Jews would just sit there and die for everyone else's crusade, literally. And so it's this is, I think, the first one that's really not on the Churban Abayit, and this is what Yonatan was saying, that the Kinot moved from, what was it, Avelut Yishana, but is this Avelut Yishana? To us it's Avelut Yishana. To the people who wrote this, it was the more closer Avelut, and it just each tragedy throughout the year, it just brings us closer. And I think if you read the words and some of the other ones also, you see some of the things that unfortunately we experienced up close in last October, and the death and the dying. And I was also thinking, reading the last Kinot about the Sarah Malchut. So we have this time, we have maybe the 900 Harugi Malchut. We have all the holy people, or the holy soldiers that we look up to, and that we learn about them, and we say things about them, that different people have created websites and stuff to talk about all the wonderful things that some of the soldiers have done. So I think we can keep those things in mind, and perhaps if we can't cry over something that happened because it's written in an archaic language, we can try to cry over some of the thoughts that we can bring back from the horrible things that we saw and heard in October.
I think what the Paitanim did was employ deep poetry and imagery in language which I would imagine even a Hebrew speaker has trouble looking into the depth of what the poets had in mind when they brought Talmudic imagery, biblical imagery, historical imagery into their poetry. And it probably behooves us, as we're reading the various Kinot, to try to look into the mind of the person, like Eliezer HaKalir, which was a few of the Kinot that we read, the 7th century, if I'm not mistaken. A number of these are written already in the 11th and 12th century, the great poets of the Middle Ages, who employed, again, the devices of the language of poetry to explore and reveal the depths of revulsion that we feel as we recall these various events. And they're not all, I read it, they're not all clear to me what we're saying. On the surface, I got it, but I'm sure there's a huge amount of depth into every one of these that behooves exploration and understanding.
The next kina is Kavav, and in Kavav it's basically, it starts off with when Yirmiyahu went to Kivrei Avot. This is I'm just reading from the article here, but I think it's a fascinating thought what's happening here. Essentially, the Yirmiyahu, it says Azmalach Azbehalach Yirmiyahu el Kivrei Avot. Yirmiyahu went to the Kivrei Avot. Who's the Kivrei Avot? After the destruction of the temple, after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, Hashem is who destroyed the Beit HaMikdash himself, or allowed it to be destroyed. He is in mourning, and he is now suffering himself from the outcome of it. And so the Medrash Medrash Echa brings down that Hashem said to Yirmiyahu, I feel like a father whose only son has died on his wedding day. Go to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and Moshe from their kvarot, from their burial places, and maybe they know how to cry. Maybe their crying will be able to both comfort me and as well arouse my mercy for you. So Yirmiyahu goes to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and he wakes them up, and they come before, and they come to the side of the Beit HaMikdash, and they cry, but it does nothing for Hashem. And then he gets Moshe, and Moshe comes, and Moshe cries, and it does nothing for Hashem. What in the end does arouse Hashem to have Rahmanot? So finally he goes to the Imaot, and he brings the Imaot, and each one cries, but it's really as we learn in Yirmiyahu, the pasuk of Kol Hashem, Kol B'Rama Nishma Racham Tamrim Racham Avakal Baneh. It's the crying of Rachel that finally arouses Hashem to mercy, and I think this is for me, and living here in Efrat, I think this is also super poignant, because we live on the Baderech Lavo. Where was Rachel buried? Baderech Lavo Ephrata, right on this road. I'm sure the tour guides could describe it better. But when we first made Aliyah, that was a place that for me was so important to go into daven there and to really connect with the history. And so I think we can, by saying this Kina and by thinking about this, hopefully we can use the same merits of Rachel and all of the tefillos and everybody, then all the mothers perhaps of the past year and a half that have lost their children. We could use that to arouse Hashem's mercy and bring the final geula.
Where is this?
Where's Kever Rachel?
Where is it that you went to?
Kever Rachel.
So
Kever Rachel?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how long people are at Efrat. When we first came to Efrat, before Kfisham in our road, we drove through Beit Lechem, past Kever Rachel. We drove every day, in and on the way back and forth to Yerushalayim, past Kever Rachel. It's our backyard. This is
25 years ago it was a lot different.
This is true.
So this is like when we're our own worst enemy, right? Because it was a Jew who was an apostate who went to the king and said, "Hey, look at all these terrible things that the Gemara says about the Christians," and then the king's like, "Oh wow, if it says all those things about the Christians, we should probably burn all these books." And they burned every single book in France, every single Gemara in France, and that was the end of 1,000 years of Jewish learning in France.
What we're saying, Eitan, I think this wasn't books, right?
They were smart.
They were bound books.
Yeah.
But
They
bound
weren't
binding.
printed. They were handwritten. They were the handwritten books by sages. It wasn't like you could print the book. It was before the printing press. So they were actually books, but you couldn't just reset the plates and print them again. You'd have to like go. Anyway, yeah, it was really the end of Jewish learning in France for a very, very long time.
And also each of the books, a lot of them had writing in the on the margins.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, they did. No, that's how that's how
I
people
don't know.
studied the books.
So
They
he
wrote.
said-
And then they wrote in the margins and everything.
Okay, could be. Either way.
So the destruction was not just, it wasn't just the end of the learning, it was also the destruction of all the learning that had, practically speaking, of all the learning that had gone on, because so much was lost
Yeah.
from the people that had studied.